Good to see some of you, and I know some more of you are there. So I'd like to start by paying respects to the Indigenous elders past, present and emerging of the lands on which we gather. So here in Perth, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, they're in Bankstown, the Darug people of the Eora Nation, who for millennia have lived in harmony with the land and adapted to numerous times of vast climate change, working in harmony with the land and the changes. So I wish to express my heartfelt appreciation for their deep wisdom they so willingly share today, if we only listen. So then I'd like to recite as an invocation to invoke the blessings of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, Shakyamuni Buddha mantra. And for my mind, it's good to think that all mantras or prayers literally generate good vibrations in our bodies and in the environment around us, so a healing energy in the world. I was reflecting earlier today that when I was some years ago at the Chinese gardens there at Darling Harbour, it was an eclipse day, a solar eclipse day, and they're like in the Tibetan astrology and probably in other astrology, they're, there's sort of times when all the merits of all the practice you do gets multiplied 100,000 times or something. And so we're there doing, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, the mantra of compassion, at one of the ponds with all the goldfish. And I've got anyway, so I can't see where my mala went to, but I had a crystal mala. I kid you not, one of the goldfish went through the middle of it. And I was like, it was too quick. You couldn't even get a photo, but it really did happen. And I thought, well, it got a few, can we say it was hooked by compassion? Maybe. Anyway, that's a terrible joke to start with. But I'll recite now the Shakyamuni Buddha mantra. Taya tao mune mune maha mune suha. Taya tao mune mune maha mune suha. Taya tao mune mune maha mune suha. So I ordain, first of all, I should say, springing into action, I couldn't let down the opportunity that it was September and spring. So that was another, you got that, I guess. I ordained in 2006, which was a few months before my 50th birthday. I think I've just given my age away. When my friends wanted to celebrate my 50th, they'd been planning beforehand. But there I was, ordained, abiding in the 8 precepts, not eating after midday. So dinner was out, partying was out, what to do. And my abbot and ordaining master, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, had just been to see An Inconvenient Truth. And that was screening in Sydney at that time. So invited all my friends, off we went. I thought, well, if Lama Zopa went, I've had permission to go and see. And it just was indicated to me of, and continues to be, how very much our lamas, our teachers, are so very well ahead of us in a lot of ways, aware of the urgent need for messaging about climate change, global warming, the imbalance of the external elements, which reflects the imbalance of the internal elements in our body, and especially in the mind. And in the Tibetan tradition, this is the whole basis of Tibetan medicine. Early in 2020, Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave the transmission of some prayers, Tanton Gyalpo prayers. So Tanton Gyalpo, I think, was a 13th century in Tibet, and he was able to quell disease, famine, conflict, where nothing else could. And so we got the transmission of these prayers for overcoming disease, famine, conflict. And this was in response to COVID. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche at the time, so this was early 2020, said, after COVID, we'll have worldwide famine, and then all the world will be at war with all the world, from the interpersonal relationships up to the global level. It really insisted everybody at war with everyone. So, and then the following week, the World Health Organization made a prediction of global famine. And I thought, it wasn't supposed to come so quickly. But that's how we think, isn't it? In the early 1990s, I worked for what was then the Australian Freedom from Hunger campaign, which was a project of the World Health Organization. And the slogan was, there's enough food in the world for people's needs, not enough to feed people's greed. And that's true today, you know. And then Freedom from Hunger became part of Community Abroad, now Oxfam, and it was a bit more political. And, you know, the slogan there was, poverty is structural and deliberate. In other words, it's not about, there's enough resources to go around, it's about distribution of the resources. And at that time, I was asked to go to Namibia, and it was just post-independence of Namibia from South Africa in 1990. And so you're talking about a country that's semi-desert, and that the only things that grow are millet and diamonds, if they grow, if you can say they grow. So stark poverty, no running water in the areas I was working, and yet diamonds were being mined and wealth exported, and everyone was really aware of that. So today, I guess, you know, seeing the price hikes in groceries as a result of all these floods and droughts and environmental disasters and war, and we see people, particularly those who are poorer, opting for cheaper but nutritionless foods, you know, fast foods. So it seems to be it's always the poorest who are hit the hardest. Also in 2020, His Holiness the Dalai Lama launched his book, Our Only Home, which is an appeal to humanity about our shared responsibility to take care of this planet, which is our only home, and all its inhabitants. And, you know, the sacred earth, the sacred people, and all other living beings. And so when I checked, according to Google, the human population is, wait for it, 0.01% of living beings on the planet. So this really puts us into some stark perspective, isn't it? It's quite, you know, quite some years ago, I read a book called, I think it was called Living Earth, and it was talking about as they're able to research further and further into the depths of Earth, you know, hundreds of kilometers down, they're able to find more life forms, not to mention in the oceans, in the skies, you know. Of course, there's all the large animals and birds and so forth we see, but, you know, microscopic living beings. So this whole, it is a living earth, and to relate to it as such. So the Dalai Lama has spoken quite frequently over the last few years of this world system coming to an end within a century or two maximum, in sense of, you know, also scientists have been talking about that, but we're coming to the end of an eon. And His Holiness spoke of the fire of destruction at the end of a great eon, and said, if we work on transforming our minds as Dharma practitioners, we can attain the Pure Land or Nirvana, liberation, and from there even be able to observe the destruction of the world, not in a detached way, but in other words, not be affected by it, but can help and not get overwhelmed by it, which is, I guess, a lot of the response that we have today when we hear about climate change, global warming, and so forth. So if we think about it, human beings have done the most damage to the planet out of all the sentient beings we coexist with, even though they are vastly greater in number, like 1 trillion or so to 8 billion. So we humans are also the only ones who have the intelligence and capabilities to change this story. And then as Dharma practitioners, in fact, we have the social, ethical, compassionate and spiritual imperative to do so. We have that. And I always ask myself to motivate myself, if not me, who? If not now, when? So how critical does it have to get? When I was at ANU in the 1970s, I was part of the Friends of the Earth movement against uranium mining and so forth. And there were warnings there that in 50 years, we'll experience the sort of global warming we're having. 50 years then didn't seem a long way off. Now it's right here in our lived experience. So I'm pretty sure that if the Buddha was to return to our world today, the Buddha would certainly be campaigning to protect the environment, maybe doing even more, just as the Dalai Lama and other lamas of all traditions, are advocating for us to do, taking responsibility. And in my tradition, Lama Yeshe, who founded the organization I'm part of, FPMT, his reincarnation, Osel, who's a young man, Spanish man now in his mid-30s, he, in 2019, started the Global Tree Initiative, and it was motivated by a deep-seated interest to find a way of people from all backgrounds, all religions, all socioeconomic circumstances to come together over a meaningful project and then to offer to His Holiness Dalai Lama as a token of gratitude for the never-ending inspiration His Holiness provides the world through his living example and advocacy. So His Holiness is a well-known champion of the environment and environmental issues. Whenever the Dalai Lama would visit Australia, it seemed that, when you got your show bag for the visit, there was always seeds to take home and plant, seeds of compassion, I think it was called. So the Dalai Lama always calling upon people to act with a warm heart and sense of universal responsibility to make continuous efforts to reverse and remedy the degradation of our environment. So also the Global Tree Initiative is a grassroots international environmental campaign launched through a global community to get a sense of we can achieve a greater result working together than we could possibly do each one individually. And dedicating that to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's Holiness the Dalai Lama, to the planet and all living beings, including the human beings, our humanity. And in my tradition, when you take some teachings from a Lama, they give you what's called a commitment. It might be recite this many mantras, this, do that. Oso's commitment is to plant a tree a year. Similarly, I just was reading recently about, there's many global tree initiatives and so forth that in India, a similar plant a tree initiative, the Queen has had initiatives like that. There's quite a few. So it seems to be something that people can easily engage with. We want to make it easy, accessible. So if we look at the foundation of Buddhism, for examples, Shakyamuni Buddha was born as his mother leaned against a tree for support. He left the palace, shaved his head, gave away his luxury garments and wealth to live simply. The Buddha attained enlightenment, seated beneath a tree, taught under trees, passed away as trees stood witness overhead. The Buddha taught using environmental analogies of the fields, the sprouts and seeds, the flowers or weeds, that we still refer to today. And it's a great reminder of our global economic, ecological dependence. I've got a book I just got to go and grab. but I had everything prepared. So this one sutra called the Golden Light Sutra, it's quite lengthy. There's a chapter called the Inviolable Rights of Kings. So if we, instead of kings, think of world leaders or local, political leaders, if we like. So at the time of the Buddha, it was, there were little kingdoms everywhere, a bit like Europe today. And this is the predictions that the Buddha gave. And for me, it seems to resonate with our experience today. Upon arrival of a foreign army, the country will utterly succumb. Resources and race too will fall away. Those who amassed wealth through trickery and deceit will rob each other entirely of means. Unfavorable winds will arise. Unfavorable rains will fall. The sun and moon will be unfavorable, and likewise the planets and stars. Where a king is negligent, famine will descend upon the land. Seeds, crops, flowers, and fruits will cease to grow and flourish. When a king overlooks those who do wrong in his realm, unhappiness will befall. Before long, the king will incur the wrath of the gods. His kingdom will wither away. Mayhem will prevail in the land. By weapons too, it will give way. Covert acts, strife, and disease of every variety will come to be. Shooting stars will rain down. Likewise, mock suns will shower. Fear of foreign armies and famine will greatly occur. People will pillage one another, seizing homes, resources, and wealth. Region by region throughout the land, they will slay one another with arms. Familiar? Today, the war in Ukraine, all the other wars, the environmental disasters like in Pakistan and, well, not even Pakistan, we can come closer to home, Northern Rivers and New South Wales and Victoria and many places. And I know in Sydney you're worried about it's going to start raining, non-stop again. There's people being affected big time. And in the dedication chapter from Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which is part of our Mahayana studies, Arya Shantideva, who was at Nalanda University in India in the 8th century, said, he made these, as part of that, his prayers. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks, may there be timely rains and bountiful harvests, may all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit, may all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments, whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again, may the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed, may the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. So this was an 8th century appeal to humanity. What are we doing to make this a reality 1300 years later in the 21st century? As His Holiness has said, prayers and good wishes are not enough. They're good, but they're not enough. We have to assume responsibility. We have to take action. That large human movements spring from individual human initiatives. His Holiness says, I believe every individual has a duty to help guide our global family in the right direction. This is not a guilt trip for what we are not doing. Simply, this is a question of survival because this beautiful blue planet is our only home. In other words, we need to live more simply as the Buddha demonstrated so others can simply live. And fortunately, we have all these initiatives where people are realizing that and, downsizing, tiny houses, Marie Kondo, the house, declutter, be content with less. We hear how the climate change is affecting our poorest communities. But it won't take long before we all feel it. It's already close to home. Maybe we're already feeling it. So saving the environment is our collective responsibility. Every passing day, the climate change is causing Pacific Islands to disappear into the sea. accelerating the extinction of species at alarming proportions and aggravating a water shortage as it's infected the entire European continent. So climate change threatens our very existence on Earth. For the Dalai Lama, the environmental crisis is real and urgent, and he exhorts people of goodwill, whatever faith, to acknowledge our global interdependence with each other and with the planet, and work to eradicate injustice and repair the planet. Just like many other Buddhist thinkers, such as Stephanie Kaza, a Zen professor, who, you know, her books on green Buddhism, Mindfully Green, Conversations with Trees, and of course, you can go past Thich Nhat Hanh, who have joined this conversation about the environment, and not just Buddhists. His Holiness book, Our Only Home, stands alongside Pope Francis's Laudato Si on care for our common home, as a reminder that it is destructive human arrogance is being challenged by all major faith traditions. Over the past few years, millions of young people have been protesting, calling on political leaders to take action to combat climate change. They're helping educate the public, even as we witness the destruction of ecosystems and the dramatic decrease in biodiversity. So on Monday, I went on my first protest in Western Australia outside Bunbury Court, and that was supporting those coming for the judge being arrested for trying to protect the native trees unique to the area that were under threat of destruction by a freeway bypass encroaching on their habitat. And it was interesting when I was there, because they said, oh, we want our religious supporter in the front row, so that because they were taking videos and they wanted to show support. And I think this is very similar to when Venerable Ajahn Sujato, you know, supported on behalf of the Australian Sangha Association, the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And, you know, as part of that we, you know, we have that opportunity as monastics. You know, we're Buddhist. I mean, there could have been a lot of lay Buddhists and you wouldn't know. But anyway, of course, I couldn't sing songs and dance as the others were doing. So I chanted mantras, and I told them that's what I was doing. And they were so pleased about that. And, you know, in relation to young people, such as quite a few of you here, this is really very real, you know, crying out to have a future in their lifetimes. At the beginning of the 21st century already, His Holiness Dalai Lama was frequently making you know, opportunities to meet and wanting to meet with young people. As he said, this is your century. You know, anyone over 30, you're so last century. But the thing is, calling on young people to take action to create the world, because it's the young people of today who are our future world leaders, and to create the world we all want to live in. It's not too late. So His Holiness really appreciates, for example, as many people do, Greta Thunberg's efforts to raise awareness of the need to take direct action. And if this is not an example of one individual inspiring a whole worldwide movement to elevate the issue of global warming among school children, it's quite remarkable. And so the Dalai Lama says, I support her Fridays Are for the Future movement, which is a movement of over 500 young activists from 38 countries with a mission to, they've got, you know, sort of 4 points: to create a safe pathway to keep the global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we've just had the report come out this week on climate change. It's not looking too much like that. My experience this year in January, my first summer in Perth, they did tell me that it would get hot, but then they said, no, it wasn't supposed to get this hot. It's broken all the records. It was like 43 up to, by the time it got to, I thought 46, okay, that's bearable. 48, I discovered wasn't bearable as far as I was concerned. And then up north, it's, you know, gets to 50 plus. And it made me think, how much heat can the human body, human existence tolerate, right? Just to survive. We're not talking about flourish. And so also advocating for climate justice and equity for everyone, and responding to the best ecology science currently available, uniting behind it, and to follow the Paris Agreement. So as His Holiness says, it's the youth of the 21st century who have the ability and opportunity to bring change, to create a century of peace, dialogue, and compassion, and have the sense of urgency. And I'd have to say the courage as well. So last, but we can't, just rest all our hopes with younger generations, speaking as not one of the younger generation. So last November, the Centre for Compassion and Altruistic Research in Education, CCARE, at Stanford University, and key players in there are like Thubten Jinpa, one of the key translators for His Holiness Dalai Lama, Philippe Golden, and other Buddhist influences, if you like, combined with the University of Edinburgh's Golden Global Compassion Initiative, and the Centre for Techno-Moral Futures at the University of Edinburgh. I just love that these centres exist. So they hosted a first of its kind event, Realising a Compassionate Planet, bringing compassion science into dialogue with climate science and catalysing compassion in urgent action for the world. So this is very, very inspiring, and it ran alongside COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference, to look at and to provide a gathering place for climate scientists, change makers to join forces all around the world, tapping into compassion as one of the strongest motivations for change known to humanity. As Charles Darwin said, we are hardwired for compassion. We can't help but help. So recent studies suggest the world is getting close to exceeding its carbon budget. And so this budget must become the most important currency of our time. I look at it whenever I fly, which is not very often these days, and always do the carbon offset. And you think, but what about all those big companies? Anyway, contribute what I can. But, we've got to, do what we can, because use our time wisely, time's running out. So really, we need to have 8 billion human beings on Earth having a sense of universal responsibility to rebalance our relations with the environment, not just being theoretical. We have classically, the meditation on the relation of the elements in the body, and meditating on that in relation to the external elements, and the fact that we can't have one without the other. And if one's out of balance, the other's out of balance. That's so, that the food that we take in, the solid becomes the earth substances, and we excrete, caca and so forth. And then the water element, all our sweat, and we sweat it out through our skin, and we need to drink. We won't survive very long with it. And then it goes out in the urine. So all of these, it's so interconnected. And so those who have children also need to think about how life will be for them and their grandchildren. Even now we need to be looking ahead how things might be in the 22nd and 23rd centuries. So there's enough evidence. I've already said that, sorry. At the beginning of the year, end of last year, I was given a Christmas gift of the International Tibetan calendar, and it was calendar of the great rivers of Tibet. And it was a really great awareness raising, pictorial representation when you think, what's the reality in Tibet? So my teacher at Chenrezig Institute in Queensland, Geshe Sotram, grew up as a farmer in a remote Tibetan village. The river that he grew up on has become a stream due to mining and global warming. The great rivers of Tibet are a critical water source for all of Asia, all the major rivers of Asia. So it's really critical. A combination of urbanization and intensified militarization and mega dams linked to China's infrastructure program are creating dramatic ecological shift and irreversible damage to the Tibetan plateau. You see disappearance of wetlands, alpine meadows, large areas of grassland and permafrost. Here in Australia, of course, we all witness the impact of millennial drought and climate change. For example, the Murray-Darling Basin system, the horrific black summer of the horrific bushfires of 2019-2020, which cost Australian agriculture $4 to $5 billion. So it's just agriculture, and not including the subsequent bushfire seasons and the breaking of temperatures. We seem to be breaking all the records. So another initiative, Sacred People, Sacred Earth, is a list of requests that institutions of different religious backgrounds are asking people to come together and lobby for. So this includes renewable energy, finance that has compassionate values, jobs and healthcare for all people, respect for Indigenous rights, welcome for climate migrants affected by climate change, to meet the emissions by 2030, an end to the planet's damage, elimination of amoral finance, unethical finance, and just contributions from wealthy countries and bold faith community leadership. So if we reflect, all the Buddha's teachings come down to two things: the philosophical view of emptiness, of dependent origination, which explains how things exist in reality, in an actual sense. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, we're all interbeings, we're all globally connected and rely on each and every other living being for our survival. So that's the first one. And then the practice of non-harmfulness, ahimsa. And non-harmfulness is not just extended to the environment around us in the sense of trees, animal habitats, but taking into consideration everything that lives down to the tiniest insect. So we need to develop a practice and a behavior that doesn't inflict harm on any living being. And that's a tall order. All beings have Buddha nature, the right to coexist and share this planet, which is also their only home. And yet, we, humans in particular, harm other living beings in a variety of ways, and through harming the environment, harming their environment, their habitat that they live in. So the ways that we inflict harm upon others essentially depends on our state of mind. We live in an environment that depends on the elements, that has arisen from the elements, and the elements are impermanent. And as such, they're subject to change. This is their nature. However, through our activities as human beings, we're accelerating that change in destructive ways. I think about 15 years ago, His Holiness Dalai Lama requested one Lama, Keti Tenchab Rinpoche, to go to Antarctica to do practices to realign the planet. And so he went down on it was a Russian freighter actually, and there happened to be some tourists on board. So when he went off to do his thing in Antarctica, the tourists decided what he was doing was more interesting what they were doing, so they all followed along. So whatever practices he did would say, well, the planet isn't in balance. But initiatives such as this, like all the other initiatives in the world, are helping to make it better, as better as possible. It could have been much worse. So this is, I guess, we have these what we call cities, and they say the rain-making one or so forth is one of the easiest ones. In fact, in Central Australia, you have Indigenous rainmakers, that sing up the rain. So that's well documented in films like Putapuri, and showing over about 15 years of singing up the country and making change. You know, it's not magic, it's possible to rebalance the elements. When I was in Queensland, I read about some guy who'd bought an island off Queensland and, you know, sort of reintroduced the native vegetation, and all the birds came back. And so it completely transformed what had been an island that had been completely stripped. And it, you know, in our lifetime, it's amazing that people dedicate themselves to such projects. So we really need to look at what's the mindset that leads to greed or disconnect from the environment. Is this one of not finding satisfaction in whatever we do and feeding insatiable desires, craving for more and more, not knowing how to look for satisfaction, not understanding what brings true satisfaction, lasting satisfaction. And so the desire energy tries to find ways in order to, you know, satiate that unyielding satisfaction within us, to create that. And through that, cause harm to the environment and the variety of things that we do. So one analogy is, say you have a bag of rice, a kilo of rice, and it's supposed to last a whole week. And you become careless how you measure out that rice. You know, you burn half of it, you scatter it about, and what remains, you're not going to have enough rice to last 1 week. So in some sense, we can say that's what we're doing to the environment. We're heedlessly utilizing resources which are not unlimited. We live in a world of limited resources. If we look back historically, you know, Indigenous Australians historically lived off the land and moved around from area to area, working with the land, with the environment, you know, and practice fire stick farming so that they'd start to burn off another area so that the animals could relocate over there before they were decimated by fire, and, you know, many, many sophisticated ways. And there was always plenty to eat. And okay, things have changed dramatically since then. We're not going to relive those conditions anytime soon. But we can consider our consumption. I remember when I was working for Oxfam, and we had a representative go to the NGO forum at the UN Climate and Economic Development Conference in Rio. I think it was in '92. And she said that when they were in negotiations about, you know, trying to reduce global consumption, that the UN representatives, they'd been given this deal. They were on the phone to the White House going, nobody likes us here. And I said, because their message was the American consumer lifestyle is not up for negotiation. That was then, right? And so this sense that of validity in consumption, we can look at, you know, the cars we use, the petrol that's used for fuel, travel to different places. People are very aware of that now. The price has gone up. The different technologies, we invent machinery, and, you know, even we don't want the things that are being invented, but there's going to be some PR company that's going to find a way to sell it to you that you're going to need it. I remember His Holiness Dalai Lama many years ago saying, one diamond ring, very nice, you know, but a whole handful of diamond rings, very ugly. Saying, you know, you don't need all that jewelry. You don't need all those resources. So, you know, we can see that, we know that the Buddhist teachings are aiming at developing a greater sense of satisfaction, thinking, okay, whatever I have now is okay. It is enough. I look around me and I think it's more than enough. And I don't, not that I think it's mine, but what I'm provided with is more than enough. And I don't necessarily need more than what I have, keeping in mind that we're living in an environment with limited resources. So developing a sense of restraint, you know, to continue to unfold so that a greater degree of satisfaction comes along with that. And that's what the Buddhist teachings are about. So in a way, we can say the Buddhist teachings are very directly related to coming up with ways of coping with climate change. So when you look at the life of monastics, monks and nuns, of course, this life is about trying to limit the resources that we use, minimizing all the different sets of clothing, the different products, gone are the hairstyles, makeup, jewelry, and so forth. We limit the things we use. And for myself, I take great inspiration from the forest tradition monasteries and nunneries, really modeling environmental sustainability and living within and conscious of the environment. You know, before I came to live in Perth, which was only just under a year ago, and a previous visit, and when I went to Bodhiana Monastery, and people taking us around said, "Would you like to visit Ajahn Brahm's cave?" And I thought, what on earth would I be going to his room for? And I said, no, he's away. It's part of the tour guide. I went, okay. And I don't know if anyone's had that opportunity. It's part of when they take you on a tourist guide, when he's not in residence. I went in, and it's a cave literally built into the hill that was built for him. And he's got like a mattress on the floor. He's got a little ledge in the rock for a tiny altar, Buddha statue, and light, which is a hole in the sort of ceiling of the cave, if you like, top of the cave. That's it. That's it. That's all there is. That's quite amazing. And the fact that, you know, after lunch, on days when he's in residence, then he's in there in whatever period of time till the next day, meditating. It's very, very inspiring. I can't say that's my lifestyle, but it's an example of what is possible. So, okay, this is a kind of lifestyle of monastics. It's not for everyone. However, you know, we can all do something. For example, the Dalai Lama says, start with small actions. He says, when I get up in the morning and I brush my teeth, rather than turning on the tap and just letting the water flow, I put a glass and a small amount of water, that's enough. And of course, he says, rather than taking a bath, lying in a bath. Well, I don't think he has a bath, but when he was touring around, he'd be staying in hotels, and you know they often have lavish baths because everyone wants to give the Dalai Lama a very nice place to stay and security and whatever. He says, I just take a quick shower, and in fact, that's in line with our monastic vows, you know, to not overutilize the resources as much as possible. And I find for myself, there's still a lot more I can do. And I used to have the little shower timers that you put in the shower, and when all the grains had run down, that's it, stop the shower, in case you hadn't stopped it before that. But I do like to have a quick shower. That one's easy. You get clean. So making small actions so that what we consume is measured, you know, we become more conscientious, we become more aware, and then we're more encouraged that we can do more by starting small, taking little steps. So it's really a good approach, keeping showers minimal, not overeating, not over-consuming, not amassing stuff. My father, who passed away 15 years ago, and my mother would say he would always be talking in his sleep. She said, we have no secrets, he talks in his sleep. But she said for the past few years of his life, he would always be going, stuff. So this idea of having this stuff bearing on your shoulders, that he was even having dreams about, you don't want to be living like that. I thought, I don't want to be living like that, so downsize. You know, so those of you who are lay practitioners as well, you know, think about what sort of lifestyle according to your own ability. You know, that's a behavior which finds greater satisfaction, simply be content with what we have. I remember one Lama saying, well, whatever socks you have, they're the socks you have, you know, just simply. There's a lot of things that we can do, limiting the things we use, limiting our consumption, participating in Earth Hour. I always get so amazed. Earth Hour is like 1 hour a year where all the lights go off, right? On a Saturday night, and usually a Saturday night. And what amazes me is that, yes, we in our little abodes are contributing something by not having the lights on. But in Sydney, like when all the lights in the city go off and you realize all that power all night, day after day, the rest of the year, it's unnecessary, just the lights in buildings. I mean, companies would save themselves a lot of money. I don't get why they think they've got to have all the lights on all night. I mean, there's enough beacons for planes and things. Yeah. Mind you, someone suggested turning off the street lights, and I said, no, street lights we need for safety. We've got to have wisdom as well. So, you know, yes, we can take these actions and protect the environment, participate in World Environment Day, clean up Australia, all of this. But it has to run deeper. We have to deal with our mind, that craving mind, that of desire, you know, to bring a really effective response to climate change. It has to begin with our state of mind and curbing our desires. Watching, I remember one teaching, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, saying, go into the shopping mall and just don't buy anything, but watch the mind of desire going towards things. And that's really useful to see how the craving mind will still go there. You know, it's like, as I like to say, you know, I don't need anything. I don't want anything. You go into a shopping center, it's half price, it's closing down, you know, once only, oh, you know, little prick of the mind. So this main point, I guess, is looking at the sense of consumerism, which inflicts a lot of damage to the environment. And that is found mostly amongst those who have greater access to resources. And yet any movement for change starts from the ground up. When I was talking to these people on Monday at the protest, and you know, some of them are involved in the Greens Party and that, great. But it's like, how do we get that change happening up there? Change will only come from, as it always does, you know, over time, and by people from the ground up saying, this isn't okay. You know, this isn't okay. Because what have we seen, you know, in the 1970s when we were doing our protests in Canberra, you were the greenie left weirdos. And now it's like, at least we have policies, we have ministers, we have discourse, you know, and we have global responsibilities. So things have progressed, but it's come through all the varied movements that have risen up. You know, when, as part of the Liberation Prison Project and visiting people in prison, once you go into prison, you have all your possessions taken away from you. They're sort of put in a storage, whatever, I don't know, your regular clothes. It's not like you take a lot of stuff into prison. And it all gets put in your property, so to speak. And you're given, you know, the one set of clothes, or maybe two, so you can wash. I'm not sure how many sets of clothing they get. And everything else is stripped away. And as one guy said, actually, you know, he was really appreciating the fact that that gave him the opportunity to see you don't actually need much, really. Now, I think the story was different on release, because then all of a sudden everything's available to you, and it's so seductive, isn't it? It just sort of draws you in. Samdong Rinpoche, who was at one time on a sort of one of the leaders of the central Tibetan administration in Dharamsala, but is also you know, a very highly respected Lama, highly respected by the Dalai Lama and so forth. So he's in his 80s now. In 2006, so again, sort of some years ago, he wrote a book called Uncompromising Truth for a Compromising World, and said, it is a crucial time for all sensible beings who are peace-loving and care for all living beings on this planet to come together and try to educate the rest. And at the same time, to try to do something to preserve the environment, each individual doing what he or she can. Some individuals can do a great deal, otherwise, there's no hope. So again, I come back to the Buddhist teachings. I come back to our lamas directing us for a long time, actually. Well, if you think about the Buddha, 2,600 years, telling us, you know, we don't have infinite resources and we have unethical, increasingly, it would seem today, more and more unethical behaviour that's condoned in society that, as the Buddha said, creates all these environmental imbalances. We don't think of connecting those together, but they're very strongly connected. Okay, so I'll leave my talk here and happy to take whatever questions, dialogue, debate.
Thank you so much.
Bit of echo.
Can you hear me okay?
Beautiful.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Venerable. Beautiful, beautiful talk, a wonderful reminder of so many things. And I love the fact that we come back to ourselves ultimately. And
Yes.
because sometimes what can happen is when we're faced with climate action and climate change, it seems like the problem is out there, and it may seem like it's too much, too big. What can I do as an individual? But
Yes.
as you say, it really comes back to our own relationship with how to deal with our craving mind, how to deal with curbing our desires, developing more contentment and limiting consumption. And that would make a huge difference in and of itself.
In a nutshell, that's it.
Such a powerful message. So thank you so much, Venerable. I invite everyone who is in here with me, as well as those online. If you have any questions for Venerable, feel free to please put this into the chat. And also, I want to just start a little bit of a discussion for us to reflect on some things that have been spoken about today and put it into a really practical context as well. So my question for everyone to think about is, what are some ways that you want to start bringing things into action? So how to spring into action, using that analogy that Thubten Chokyi started with. So what can we do? So in terms of turning off the lights, that's like an easy, that's a given, right? Where to from here? Okay, so for those who are inspired by the talk, and I hope that was everyone, what are some of the things that you would like to make changes to?
Or maybe have done.
Or have done, yeah.
Yes.
And share these ideas with all of us. Great.
Yeah, I'll start.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Yeah. Well, my biggest contribution is by becoming a vegan.
Yes.
I was vegetarian until I saw some of the shows on the cruelty that
Oh, yes.
the cows and the chickens go through.
Yeah.
So remembering in both of those industries, every second animal is killed, like if it's a male.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's extremely cruel. A lot of suffering there. So that's the biggest individual thing I've done, and I encourage everybody else to do.
Thanks. Yeah.
I saw a wonderful documentary the other day. It's called Eating Ourselves to Extinction. It was on YouTube. It's fairly recent, narrated by Kate Winslet, the actress. And one of the facts that came up there was that 94% of the soybeans that are grown are fed to animals. Yeah, so...
Yeah, so much for my soy milk.
Yes.
I mean, I consider myself in a category of, not, being able to afford to buy organic as well, thinking not, because as people like to remind you, that for your vegetables, so many insects and beings have also died, and that's true.
Yeah.
And so even thinking about that and where possible, do we know this, and eating locally as well, if possible. There's a lot of ifs there, but I find that being in Australia, and those of you in Sydney, Canberra, whatever, myself here in Perth, We have every food in the world available to us. That's quite phenomenal. I can't get why human beings want to have such variety of food, but we do have. And so it means we can make choices. And I know when last year I was in hospital and you got to see a dietitian, and I thought, I don't even know what to ask her, but she looked at the amount of protein I was having and said, you're not having enough. And I said, is this where you're going to tell me to eat meat? And she said, no. There's plenty of protein, you know, of the non-meat variety. So it's doable because we have this, and people will say, you know, oh, but you're not getting enough protein. Believe me, I'm getting enough protein. And so probably you are too, Bill.
Yeah. The one further thing I'd like to say is, even though a lot of us can't do much tree planting, by changing your search engine on your computers and your tablets and phones to Ecosia, for every 45 searches that you do, they will plant a tree.
What is it? To
Ecosia.
Ecosia.
Yeah.
It's basically like Google, except as Bill says, if you do these searches, then it's actually helping with the count. Like depending on how many comes up in terms of searches, then they will start planting trees, which is great.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love these initiatives.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. Share something. And this happened in Fiji when I went earlier this year. And then I'm going to show you another photo. And this is what's happening on islands. And this is the direct result of climate change. And speaking to the locals there, this is happening all around in Fiji and the Fiji Islands, and I would imagine all around the world as well. Yes. And this is my sharing for today. So sometimes when we come across something like this or any other ideas that you have, please share it with other people. So when I took these photos, I shared it with all my friends and with my network, as many friends as I can, and also my network, to show them that this is real. Because sometimes we think like this is something that's happening out there, it doesn't really affect us. But when we actually have these experiences and when we can share it with others, it can be very moving, and it could be something that inspires other people to change. Okay, now we've got a comment, Venerable, from someone in the chat. And the comment is for you. Dear Venerable, thank you for sharing your wisdom. During your talk, I had a recurring thought that I found difficult to make sense of. If anicca, impermanence, and therefore climate change is inevitable, may I ask, other than on the grounds of compassion, what continues to motivate you or people to continue to fight anicca in a way?
Yeah, thanks for that comment. It's not so much to fight, shall we say, impermanence, but to see, yes, it's changing, but in what, yes, it's constantly subject to change, but it is on the basis of interdependence that it's dependent. If it is that a lot of the destruction that has occurred in the environment is due to humans, and humans have the capacity to change the way and to take responsibility, then you can take some control of that change and make it a more beneficial change. So, for example, Indigenous people, you know, historically had a sense of reciprocity, and the fact that their ethos principle was that to pass on the land to their next generation in at least as good a condition as they received it, if not better. So that's already a goal to set in terms of, oh, I want to take care because this is our habitat, what we live, and to actually make, instead of extracting from, of living with. And so we could say equally, our mind is changing all the time. And then we learn to meditate and we learn how to work with our mind to change it in beneficial ways, to actually take control of that. So it's the same, you know, because of impermanence, everything's possible. So that's that same thing.
Great answer. Thank you so much, Venerable. Okay, so I'm just going to see anyone in my room. Any other questions, comments?
Bill had a further.
Oh, Bill. Sorry. Yes, Bill.
Yeah. When you see every politician in the world, they're always talking about growing the economy.
Yeah.
But, really marketing. They want to produce more and sell more. And I don't know how we can encourage them to drop that line. Yeah.
Well, I guess they can get encouraged by the economics of it all. That's where, I find it fascinating that if the bushfire season had such a, 45 billion is a lot of money to impact on agribusiness, right? That is an economic disaster. So it's like finding those ways that it's like it proves that it's not economically viable. The other thing is, over time that change will happen from people's demand. So if we start to consume less, I mean, look at what's happened. I know for myself, being vegan in the 1980s was like, what are you talking about? Whereas now, the market responds and they say, oh, people want more vegan, here's more vegan. People want local, here's more local. So there is a response business-wise. And forget about the politicians. There is a response. And so it doesn't come maybe as quickly as we'd like, but it does come. It does come. But you've tapped into a thing that, we have the slogan, reduce, recycle, reuse. Now, I have to say, recycling, and, when I go into the Dharma Center and on the recycling, and I think we are motivated, intelligent human beings, Dharma practitioners, can't quite get it right on the recycling, but at least we're giving it a go. So pretty much people are giving that one a go, right? Reuse, we're giving it a bit of a go. Reduce, we're not doing it all. You see? So that's the one that the Buddha was talking about. We don't need so much. But so it's changing our mindset. And this is where the hope for young people who are the future politicians, leaders, and so forth.
And it's interesting, of course, that out of the three, they often say it's the reduction, it's the reduce that is the more important of the three. Because if you reduce, you wouldn't need to then go into reuse and recycle.
Yeah. I've always been amazed with like Uber Eats and all the deliveries now, instead of like everyone's going to recycling and reusing, but actually with Uber Eats, people are actually creating more mess, more rubbish rather than going to the restaurant, using the plate, and the plate gets re-washed and gets put for the dishwasher, which uses energy to wash the dishwasher, but at least it's reusing the plate and the cutlery. Versus everybody, getting Uber Eats delivery and then throwing that all back out again, which creates more rubbish for landfill.
I mean, packaging is a really big problem at the moment. So
packaging. It reminds me again in the 70s in Canberra. I think it was down in what is the centre of town? Civic Centre. And we'd go into Woolies and buy things and leave all the packaging except for the one little bag in the middle on the counter. Of course, it wasn't enough to change packaging because it's still happening, right? And now they're even packaging the fruit and veg. And it's just like, come on.
That's what I've started to do recently. Now when I go shopping for my fruit and veg, I just get whatever fruit and veg, just put it in the trolley. It's funny that you go to the checkout. And they get you all weird looking like, where's the bag? Like, well, the banana's got its bag. It's got its natural The banana's got its natural bag.
It's got its own bag, yeah.
The banana's got the bag itself. Same with fruit. I think people should just start at least by just the plastic bag, just putting the fruit in there. So you take it home, you wash it. There's no real need to put things in bags like that too. I think it's sort of silly.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So true.
We can give feedback, you know, we can give feedback to the companies. I mean, you know, I just got an email because I went and shopped at Woolworths the other day, and I got an email survey, what was your shopping experience like? And I thought, I'm not going to do that. But actually, if I wanted to say something like that, there's an avenue, right? Yeah. To be able to say, well, there's way too much packaging, and, you know, the number of people that do, you know, all these campaigns that we have, if they get enough numbers, eventually somebody will listen.
Yeah. Venerable, we've got a question from the chat. Venerable, when we share messages about causes we care about, how do we be aware of our ego and attachments? And the second part of that is also, what's the balance of maintaining inner peace, spending time meditating and practicing, and springing into action, that is taking action, thinking and doing?
Yeah, they're good points. Thanks, Soph. So I guess in terms of messages about causes that we care about, it's being aware of, okay, I care about this. Why do I care about it? And then we realize that we care about it not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of other beings, you know, in the environment, on this issue, the environment or so forth. We've got to think about what our motivation is, and that our motivation is a good one. It's based on ethics, it's based on compassion, it's based on kindness, it's based on wisdom, it's based on love. And then that's a direct counter to thinking it's just my attachment and ego speaking. So we can go through that reflection process so that we can be assured that, and that makes us feel more interconnected with others as part of those movements or part of those causes. You know, I want to be part of that response, and I'm only one as part of that response. You know, I'm no more or less than the other. That's how I would think about it. And I think that the second one's probably crucial for the whole of our life, everything. So, of course, we cultivate a sense of inner peace, spending time in meditation and practice and so forth. It's like our mental laboratory, you know, where we do the mind gym, where we do that work. But why do we do that? So that we can take that into action. And so the extent to which we can do that on any given day is up to us. You know, how many people press our buttons, and how good we are at, you know, being patient with anger, you know, as an antidote, and so forth. So we're all progressing little bit by little bit. I mean, I'm talking us as Dharma practitioners, little beginners taking steps forward. And I think the other thing that comes into that is to, we have this thing of relinquishment, that it's like at times when we're overwhelmed to take a break so that we can re-engage. And this is where, you know, something like the Metta Center and so forth, you know, having our group of Dharma buddies, that our support group, you know, our support team, that to help us, you know, re-energize, re-enthuse, you know, the power of doing things as a group, whether it's meditation or action, the same, right? It's a greater energy than us individually. It doesn't mean don't do your meditation at home individually, don't do your practice, but having those opportunities. And then, you know, for me, I know something that stops me springing into action is a laziness of my mind. I'm going to really check that laziness. Oh, you know, and then I can use any excuse in the world, like, you know, like I went to that protest because somebody sent me a text about it, and I'd been having that. I thought, I can't let him down. You know, I've got to come. But as a monastic, I would say, well, you know, I'm not invited along. And I think, well, of course, I'm not going to be invited to a lot of things. But it has become for me starting to think I've got to be out there in the street a bit more. And in fact, the Dalai Lama said it to all our geshis, you know, our Tibetan lamas, one time in Melbourne. He pointed at the front row. They're all sitting there because their high lamas are in the front row. He says, you get out of your ivory towers and get out in the street and be amongst people and see how people really are in the world. Get real, you know, basically. He was telling them to get real. And I think that's a message to us all. But don't feel like you've got to take on the whole world, you know. And that's where I think as long as we can feel like, okay, what's my first step to taking action? Simply being aware, right? Being aware of others in the environment. Thank you very much. The ants say to me that I'm aware of them. I don't go treading all over them all. I probably still tread on some. I can't vouch that I don't tread them, but I'm much more mindful. And so whatever we're able to do and think about doing, and then what do? You rejoice. Yay, I did a good job today. I put it in the recycling bin, in the right one. Real things. And then we're like, okay, I'm getting good at this. Maybe I'll make a sign for the Dharma Center, you know, whatever. We just, you know, we take those little steps, but our practice is why we call it practice, is so important. And it's not just to practice, it's to actually put it into action. And then we can test, okay, got a bit more practice to do. Okay, step back. You know, we take a few steps forward, things upset us. Like one of the guys in prison, he said, I was sitting there in meditation, you know, it was all very peaceful. And then he said, 5 minutes later, my cellmate pissed me off. And I said, well, at least you had those 5 minutes that we didn't have before. You know, that's significant. It is. Yeah.
Venerable, I had a comment, and I think thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
The reduce, reuse, and recycle principles. And I think there's another R that we could also practice, which is actually rejuvenate. So we're quite fortunate in Australia, and we've got the forefathers of permaculture principles, Bill Mollison,
yes,
you know, teaching us this amazing technology and how we can live sustainably. And, you know, by practicing permaculture principles, which is, you know, a whole new mindset on how we can live in harmony with nature, and also in doing so rejuvenate the earth. I think it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think he said a lot of the world's problems can be solved in a garden. And I think it's a very powerful statement, because when you're producing your own food, even just a small way, you can break the dependency on the large corporations, and this whole chain falls apart if you simply grow a little bit of your own foods, you know.
Yeah. That's a great idea. And the community gardens, you know, that are springing up here and there, and people sort of like, I'm contributing to that, not just for myself, but for my community, and receiving back from the community. So it's really wonderful to see that. I remember in the UK when they started community gardening, there was a lot of kale growing. And nobody was taking the kale because they didn't know what to do with it. So they started leaving recipes for kale, so that, oh, this is what I do with it. So that people took the kale home. Yeah, there's a lot of initiatives like that, like ride sharing. Yeah, the garden is definitely a place. I think, you know, the gardening show seems to show a lot of different diversity of different ways of, you know, taking that joy from gardening. I know I grew up in a very poor family, but it was a family that had a yard that we could grow our own veggies. And you're also getting fresh. You're getting it straight out of the garden, you know, that pesticides have not gone into it, you know, how fresh it is.
Absolutely.
It's very, very rewarding. And it hasn't been trucked from A to B, and yeah.
And you know, how can you save the earth when you have no connection to it? And I think that's a really wonderful way to build that connection with the earth, and especially for young people.
Yeah.
I think Tina can attest when her nieces and nephew come to our little house and our little garden. They just love it because they're seeing all these insects and plants that they've never seen before. Even earthworms, compost worms. Are fascinating. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay. That's great.
Thank you. Thanks, Zen. Venerable, probably one last question before we do our closing. So the question is, how to deal with the craving mind, the mind that enjoys sensual pleasures and consumption and shopping?
Oh, that's the whole thing, isn't it? The whole yeah. So we observe the craving mind. So, I mean, sometimes people say to me, I know I shouldn't, it's usually about chocolate. And to my mind, it's like, well, if you're going to have it, at least enjoy it. Don't guilt trip yourself. But, I guess it's looking at like some examples that were being used about overconsumption were people like, having to buy 3 or 4 sets of clothing a week. And I mean, maybe, I don't know if people do that. But anyway, people who do that and then, change their clothes so many times a day or whatever. So I think if we at least see, well, there's a certain level of just being practical. And then beyond that, how much am I just consuming because I'm being sucked into this? And again, it's not to guilt trip ourselves, but just being aware of that craving mind, and being aware that creates our samsara. Like, have I had enough of this yet? But that, and it's hard because it's hard with the desire energy because it's more subtle than the anger energy, aversion energy. We know we don't want that, but it can be very subtle, right? I mean, I think about it in terms of, like I said, about foods. And forever, I remember Lama Zopa Rinpoche saying, we've tasted everything there is to taste. And that reminds me, I don't need new tastes. I've got a diversity as it is. I don't, need to have something because it's the latest or haven't tried it before or something like that. So we observe the ways in which we can work with that to diminish that craving. It's not going to be all at once, but just little things, just taking little steps. Sometimes, like, when I'm just on food, suddenly you go to the doctor and they say, eat this and don't eat that. And you've got to like instantly change. And so if we're not so craving, that isn't a suffering. But if we're craving that and feeling missing out, like I was, I think it was about at least 30 years ago when I had to I had problems with my diet, it was way before I had ordained. And I was having problems and so forth. And I had to reduce a lot of things out of my diet. It got a bit too extreme because it wasn't healthy in the end. It wasn't balanced in the end. And so I learned about that, and dietitians are great. But also I thought, whatever happens, I'm not going to feel deprived. So rather than think about what am I missing out on, I would think, oh, that's really great. I can have this, I can have that. And so it's just a matter of gradually changing our mindset and looking at it as opportunity rather than it's not as punishment, it's not as deprivation. I think if we get into that mindset, we'll just give up.
Thank you so much, Venerable. So many words of wisdom today, and a very important topic and a good reminder for all of us. So thank you. I'm now going to pass the session back to Sophie.
Thank you, Venerable, and everyone for the wonderful discussion. I echo your point, Tina. It's such an important discussion, and I love that we're able to explore how we can take action as Dharma practitioners, taking care of ourselves, our environment, and other people. Venerable, would you like to do a dedication of merits before we close out? Thank you.
I'll do in Tibetan and then repeat in English.
Yep.
Gewa di nyududa lama sangye chugine jowa chikamalupa de sala gopa shu chanchut sencho rinpoche makye panam gekuchi gewa nyampa me payam gongne gongdu pewa shu. So may the mind of compassion that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Venerable.
Lovely meeting you all, and hope to see you again soon.